Hi, welcome to Think Human. I'm Chris, and in this video I wanted to talk about the simulation argument and what it is and why we should take it seriously. Now, it's a difficult philosophical problem, but on its face, this is such a compelling argument that there must be some really good reason for it not to be true. So the argument itself is that if we imagine a civilization in the future, if we keep going the way we're going, then in the future it is not difficult to imagine that we would have the technological capacity to create simulations of our ancestors and their lives and their world. And we could create a simulation that it's exactly as realistic as it needs to be for the beings in it to think that they're living in a real place and have conscious experience and so on. And so, you could study them, make it for fun, whatever. And so the argument is that if you could do that, it only takes a small part of this future civilization, just some hobbyist, someone who is interested, to create the simulation. And then you would have a whole universe with people in it. So the argument is, if they can create one, why not 100, why not 10, why not 1,000? There is nothing stopping them from creating vast amounts of simulations. And the argument is, or what I would sort of draw attention to as well, is that basically the way that we live our lives is that the planet Earth is the center of the universe. So all you need to do is to simulate the planet Earth, and you could have stars and galaxies around, but that doesn't take much computing, just what's on the planet Earth. So that's what all it takes. So planet Earth, us in the future, we create a simulation of planet Earth. And then already the ratio is 1-to-1, real life to simulation. And if they can create one, if you already have more than one simulation in the future per universe, then the likelihood of us being in a simulation is bigger than that we're actually living in a real world. So this is tremendously interesting because it only takes a fraction of some future species to be interested enough to make simulations, and then already the ratio could be something like 1,000,000-to-1, billion-to-1 of us living in the actual real world. So they could do it. There is no obvious reason why they shouldn't do it, why they wouldn't do it. And the thing is that even if they have some kind of ethics or morals or laws that, we shouldn't do it, it only takes a small fraction, and it only takes more than one simulation per universe for the likelihood of us living in a simulation to be bigger. So I think the odds are quite incredible in this sort of way of looking at it. So there must be some really good reason to think that we're not living in a simulation. Maybe it's possible we're just getting obsessed with possibilities, because this is a logical argument, and its logic, for me at least, completely holds up just thinking about it rationally. But maybe it's kind of a wrong way of looking at it. Maybe it's one of those hypotheses that just, it has a likelihood and it's really logical, but it's completely irrelevant to the actual world we live in. There might be some really good reason why it just isn't true. But otherwise, it's overwhelmingly more likely that we live in a simulation. Now, it doesn't feel like we live in a simulation, but how would we know? This is the only world we've ever known. And, everything, seems kind of real, but how can we tell the difference? And even more by the fact that what we perceive as reality is always filtered by our brains. We never get direct contact with the world that we live in. There's always this filter of our brains and how it processes things. I and what me really is the brain inside this head, and this brain lives in darkness for its entire life. There are just some wires going in from my eyes that put a bunch of information in, but my actual brain, where I live, so to speak, is in darkness in its entire life. It has no smell, it has no touch or taste or anything with it. So it's really simple to see that reality at the end of the day is just electrical signals in our heads. It is. That's the only way we get the information. So this makes it more likely in a way that we're living in a simulation, because it's, or not, depending on how you look at it. Another question would be that how would this really change the way that we're living our lives? And an answer to this, I guess, would be that not really significantly. It's the same idea as, is the universe actually a hologram, which is also probably most likely true as far as we know right now. It's this idea of, no matter what area of space you take, you have a bubble of space, a sphere of space, no matter how big or small or where it is or what's inside it. on the surface of that sphere, let's say that, there's a sphere around you. On the surface of that sphere, you could code every single molecule and atom and everything that's inside the sphere. So everything that makes up you have a bubble around it, can be written, so to speak, on the outside of this bubble, on the surface. And this extends all the way to our universe. So if we have a bubble around our entire universe, on the surface of that bubble, you could write every single description of every fundamental particle, every atom, every interaction, every tree, house, planet, sun, star, galaxy, anything that's going on, you could describe on the surface of that sphere around the universe. And that is pretty crazy. But does that really change the way that we're living our life? No, it doesn't. The reality is that us here living this is real, and the surface of the universe is equally real. So, it's a matter the way of looking at things. It's the same way as light is a wave and a particle at the same time. They're both true ways of looking at it. I don't think we're smart enough to yet reasonably, rationally think about, odds and probabilities of things happening. But I think we also make some progress with it. But yeah, at the end of the day, would it really change? It probably wouldn't change. If you had some clear, obvious sign that we're living in a simulation, what would change? Human society would be exactly the same. It would just be kind of philosophical curiosity. And of course, interesting to wonder, the source of the simulation. Where did it actually come from then? What were the beings that simulated it? It could have been us in the future, of course. Or it could have been a random alien civilization that just, wanted to have a sandbox simulation to see what happens. Make millions and millions of random planets and make life evolve around them and see what happens. Just for fun. I would do that in the future. I would do it if I could. I would simulate entire planets and universes. I would. I love that. I have the Universe Sandbox Simulator, where you can make solar systems, change them, and collide galaxies and stars and all kinds of stuff. It's really, really fun. So, if we don't change ourselves to take out the aspect of wanting to enjoy, life and fun and things that are curious and interesting to us, I don't see why we wouldn't create these simulations unless there's some, really good sort of, rule that every advanced civilization agrees that absolutely no tolerance for simulations. But it just takes one, to make a simulation. It's not that difficult in the future. If you have incredible computational power that we have in the future, it is not difficult to create these simulations. Yeah, it's quite baffling, and like I said, this is one of those things we just don't know. Logically, I think we should entertain the idea because the likelihood of that is it's a really good argument. And either, civilizations have to die out and fail once they reach some certain stage of technological maturity. They all either have to not do it or not want to do it. Some of those have to be true. Or we really are the only life in our universe. That some of those, one of those must be true for us to not live in a simulation. There must be some good reason why we don't live in a simulation, but I couldn't think of a good reason why we don't. So my own gut instinct feeling is that we don't live in a simulation, but that's probably just because I have this human bias. I'm a human being and I like to think that, my reality is real, but I'm also really painfully aware that we, the way we perceive reality, we are biased and delusional, and we have so many mechanisms that, create delusions for us in the way we perceive the world. So, yeah, I just think it's interesting to think about, and I want to share this with you. So, if you have any thoughts about this, what do you think about the simulation argument? Please share them in the comments. And of course, thank you so much for watching, and take care.